Hello everyone, I have another travel video for you, a bit of an adventure. This one was a little different, a little unusual. I went with some of my family recently to Germany, spent a little over a week there, and just as I'm explaining this video, we're going to open up with some footage of Hofgeismar, the town that we stayed in, kind of a walk through near to the downtown, like the grocery store kind of area, just kind of give you a little taste, a vibe of where we were. And this was an unusual case where I'm actually making several different versions of this kind of trip video, one that's much longer, just going to be a private thing for like friends and family, and then this public one looking at all the places that we went and just kind of a fun travel video. Because this was a different kind of trip. It wasn't really just a vacation as much as it was kind of a vacation and seeing places and having fun abroad. It was also more of a trip down memory lane, and a rather somber occasion. I grew up going to this area of Germany as a kid just about every other summer, plus some additional trips just kind of by myself, and then a couple Christmases. It was always a thing to visit relatives that we had in Germany, specifically my grandparents and the area in Germany where my dad grew up. But we had not been back there in roughly 20 years, so give or take a year or two for individually the people that were on this trip together. But that's a long time, so really it's actually been more years that since the last time I was there than the span of time in which all the years that I was there. It's a very weird thing. So it was a trip to go back and see these places, and it was interesting to see places several decades later and what changed, what didn't change. Hofgeismar in general seems very, very similar to how it was. Very little seems to have changed. You're walking down this street here, there's an old, used to be sort of a town hall, and my favorite doner place, and pretty decent pizza and other stuff, but these were just very familiar streets that then I would walk almost every day, sometimes several times a day, to go to the downtown or go to the grocery store or whatever while we were there, as we were staying in a house rather than like a hotel or something, and had a full kitchen and stuff like that. But that's why it ended up being sort of a different video with several versions, so there's a lot that's omitted from here because we were visiting a lot of places that had a lot of sentimental value. We went and we saw my grandparents' house and my dad's grave site, and it was that kind of a trip. It was very emotional, and it wasn't the same as some of the previous trips, or like a trip to Disneyland or something. It was very different in that regard, and so like a very personal thing. And so a lot of stuff is omitted from this series, but I hope you really enjoy it. We're going to be taking a look at a couple of the different places that we went to during our trip, including one of my favorite places, which is now a World Heritage Site, which is interesting, some towns that we went to, and a tier park, a zoo type area. So I hope you enjoy this if you are interested, and we're going to continue our walk here for this opening segment. And again, I wanted to open with this very lengthy kind of opening walk here in the morning. I got up, it was at this point I think around 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning maybe. So town's just kind of waking up, streets are fairly empty, and I thought that was a good occasion to just give kind of a walkthrough of the area that was the most traveled and re-traveled while we were staying there. To kind of give you a feel, and especially if you've never been to Germany, you might find this particularly interesting just to see the architecture and get kind of the vibe of the town. And to also kind of give me some breathing room to go through that explanation of the trip and how it was kind of different. So I hope you enjoy this footage, and we'll get back into the commentary in a little bit. And here we're getting into what I would just kind of refer to as sort of the town square area if we were, meeting up, if we were apart, and like where to meet. And later, in a little bit here, actually, we'll see there was a bit of a local festival here. It happened to be the last night that we were staying there, which was interesting. We had no idea it was coming, just had missed any kind of info about it, so it was just a surprise. And that was a lot of fun, so you'll see this spot again in a little bit. And as we turn into here, this is the area that I was the most familiar with. This little square here with an ice cream shop on the corner, and it is largely unchanged from when I was a kid. I used to come here, one, because it was just an interesting town that was close by my grandparents, but my grandpa's work was also in here for many years near this little spot with the ice cream shop, so I remember him going in and taking me into town, maybe getting something for work or whatever, and then stopping by here for ice cream and hanging out, so that was very familiar. And then also as you turn to the left here, down that street, that's sort of the main thoroughfare for the majority of the shops, and at either end is kind of where it ends with other things, and nice like walking street, and very quiet this time of day, but later on this gets very, very busy. As you see, it's early enough that even the cafes and the bakeries and things aren't quite open. The only thing that's really open this time of day is the grocery store at the end that I'm heading towards. Getting towards the end of the real main shopping street part of town, I walked all around town. The one morning I walked 15 miles around the whole town, seeing everything, and it was just a lot of fun. These are just images of really the main area that has a more historical feel. That's my favorite place, the doner kebab place, and so I thought you might find it the most interesting. And this beautiful hotel had a nice restaurant in it right downtown. So now a little bit of a look at the local festival, which was awesome. Tons of beer and bratwurst and all kinds of like very traditional German stuff. And then this like local teenage rock band was playing. It was really funny. The contrast made it fascinating. So this was a lot of fun. It was a great celebration. Just happened to be on our last night there, so that was fantastic. Another thing that we did while we were there, we went to a Brothers Grimm museum, which was a little bit of a mixed bag. It was fascinating, but also a little bit disappointing with how it was structured. It was interesting seeing the historical perspective and the history of the Brothers Grimm. And you'll see a little bit of footage here to some of the displays. And it was a really nice museum, and it was interesting, but I think our expectations were very different. It focused very heavily on the creation of the first German dictionary and a lot of the history of language, and that was fascinating, but it felt like it was 80-90% that, and only 10-20% focused on the Grimm's fairy tales, which is what we would really much more recognize and were a little more interested in. So it was a little disappointing in that regard, how it felt like it was a little off, or focused very heavily on the history of language and dictionary, which again was fascinating, but if I'm going around a whole museum for hours, it's not really the thing that I'll focus on. So a little bit here with the folk tales. It just felt like it was swayed one direction that was a little less interesting. And this is a neat display of Brothers Grimm's fairy tales with covers from all around the world. I don't know how many different languages it was, but that was actually one of my favorite displays. And so overall, it was a neat little museum near the outskirts of the city of Kassel, and check that out. And then they also had a traveling exhibit, not just the permanent Brothers Grimm thing, but this Imaginarium thing, which was pretty fascinating, kind of weird, but interesting, and I actually found it to be, I don't know, in a way almost the more interesting part of the museum rather than the permanent Brothers Grimm thing, which I was not expecting. But yeah, this was fascinating, a little weird. And another thing we went to has always been my favorite since I was a little kid, the Hercules Monument and the whole surrounding area. There's all kinds of stuff here, an art museum, a castle, tons of stuff. I was a little on the disappointing side because a lot of it was under restoration, so there were parts of it that we couldn't see, and it was very cloudy to start off in the morning. And this was a lot of fun because we have tons of photos, even from before I was born, in this general area, because this is something we went to just about every time we were there in the summer. And we have a lot of pictures of even some areas you can't get to anymore, like this at the very bottom. You used to be able to go back in there where there's that Neptune statue. Even when the water was flowing, we had pictures of us in there. Now it's kind of chained off. You can't walk around the perimeter and go in there. But it was still really fun to revisit. It's just a beautiful place, and it's always been one of my favorite places that I've ever been in the world. And visited my dad's old hometown, where we grew up visiting my grandparents, so it was very familiar territory. It's vastly unchanged, which was interesting. And spent some time, visiting at my dad's gravesite and things like that. So this is one of the parts of the video that's obviously cut the most short, but give a few images here, give you kind of an idea of the little town. It's a very small town. The only real changes were the fact that the population is aging out, and a lot of the kind of local shops were gone, and that was sort of sad to see that it has sort of a dying town feel. Then we went to a tier park because another castle we were going to was completely closed due to restorations. So we ended up unexpectedly spending the day here, and I went off on my own and climbed up this huge hill to where these birds were. And they have here just a bunch of predator type birds, lots of hawks, eagles, and they weren't in cages or anything. They're very close. They were within less than 10 feet, and they just have like a little chain on their legs. So it felt very kind of weird and very intimate, which was interesting. And I had a very interesting experience where I got the whole way to the top, and then I turned off my camera, stopped taking pictures, and started walking down. And all of a sudden, there was an owl that was loose that was being trained. They're working with two trainers, and the owl decided to completely ignore the one trainer and flew right over my head and into a tree. And I just stopped dead in my tracks and was like, what should I be doing here? I was waiting. I didn't want to spook it, so I didn't want to just start walking away, so I just stood still, and all these birds were freaking out and trying to basically get at the owl. So this eagle up here, her name was Medusa, had her talons out. She was pulling at her chain and like right at me. So that was an interesting experience to start this little trip to the zoo. Then I leave from there finally. They get the okay to move on, and I meet up with my mom, my brother, and we see in the distance, can't tell. Oh, is it a little goat out there or a sheep or what is it? And my mom starts making sounds, bleating like a sheep, and it runs over. And we're looking down. It's all cute and everything, and all of a sudden, into frame, 5, 6, 7 more stop popping out, and I go and reach in. My brother did the same thing. Got to pull out our phones or cameras to start recording, as they just start piling out of the woods. Ended up being close to 20 of them by the end. It was the funniest thing. My mom just kind of summoned an army.
There's a lame one back there. Mom. Oh, what the hell did you do?
Hi, guys. Oh my God. Yeah, Mom.
It's still coming.
Did you get some good pictures? I hope that you're going to send to me.
Hello. Oh.
What if these animals are naturally calm, or it's just been domesticated enough?
I guess we still. Ooh.
So, brethren.
Then one of the last places that we went was Varberg, which was a town we were very familiar with because that was the closest place to my grandparents' town, which really only had a butcher shop and a bakery. Like no real full grocery store, so this is the closest place that had kind of a full grocery store and a whole little shopping center, and so grew up going here all the time. I was very familiar with it. So there was then this odd feeling while we were there where I couldn't quite find, my place. I couldn't really put myself, like memory-wise, I was getting very confused, like where am I? And it felt weird because I knew it so intimately. This is the place that changed the most, and it was very much in the sense of the negative. And I had trouble kind of figuring out where I was because every single place that I remember being was gone entirely. It wasn't that some were changed, some were not. Every single one was gone. Got to this square here with the fountains when I finally realized where I was. The old grocery store that we went to all the time growing up was now like a little discount place, kind of like an Ollie's or a Big Lots. And the restaurant that we went to was gone. The ice cream place that we went to was a barber shop. Every single place was gone. The old department store they went to, a nice big department store, was now basically a dollar store, and the upstairs converted into apartments. It was a nice shop where we used to get like expensive, silverware and china and that kind of stuff, closed. My favorite toy store as a kid, some signage is still up, completely empty, nothing in the building, shut down, and like everything, the whole place was really pretty depressing actually to go around and see that it wasn't just that one or two things had changed. Everything was gone. Everything in the entire town, and what was opened up in their place, if they weren't totally empty buildings, was a little, like a junky discount store. Like it really felt like, wow, this is a town taking a downturn. And then afterwards, we're like, all right, let's go try and find some food. It was lunchtime, and the places that we were planning on seeing if they were open to eat were completely gone. The restaurant and sort of like just a little bratwurst place, like they were all just completely gone. And so we were wandering around like, oh crap, what are we gonna eat? And then thankfully in the distance I spotted the flag of food in a window, and we went and got some Italian food. That's my one travel tip. Every place in the world that I've been in, whether it's Europe, Asia, somewhere else in the US, whatever, if I am in search of food, don't know what to eat, look for the Italian flag and you will be fed and get a good meal. And it's never failed me. That's my one travel tip. It's never failed me anywhere in the world when I'm searching for food. So that was at least a fun little time. It was a great place and we had fun with the manager and everything there. It was a fun lunch in what was kind of a depressing town because everything was was completely gone and felt like it was falling apart. So that was a real kind of sad way to somewhat end the trip. We then went and spent a little bit of time in Frankfurt and a little bit on the way out as we were leaving in a couple days. But yeah, that was about it. Aside from the real kind of personal stuff, that was a little bit of a look into our trip to Germany. I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you haven't seen any of these videos like this I've done before, I have a bunch of old little trips and stuff and travel videos. I'll make sure I put that playlist at the end of this video.